Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the third TransformGov Talks event. Lovely to see you all this evening here in the room and online. Hello. I'm Gavin Freegard. I'm your host for the evening and one of the TransformGov Talks organisers. And yeah, before we get underway, you might have seen we had an icebreaker question on screen just to get some conversation going beforehand. How do you feel about public sector reform in 2025? If you had to sum up how you felt in one word, what would it be? Anyone? Clueless?
Worried?
What was worried? In this country or the US? Either. Terrified. Good. That's a really cheery start to the evening. We were going to put up as the question, how do you feel about Trump and the US, which we thought would get people off to the wrong start, but clearly we went for a much more optimistic question instead. So for those of you who are new to TransformGov Talks, or those of you who are coming back, welcome back. The idea is that there are lots of people in and around government who care about making government work better. So this is a new monthly meetup for you, and please do tell everyone else about it as well. We're looking for examples of innovation in the public sector or examples of impactful delivery of policy or services to come and speak. And we've got two brilliant examples of that tonight. This is live streamed and on the record, and you will be able to watch it back afterwards. We know lots of people who can't make it tonight are very keen to catch up on it. It's sort of trying to sustain the energy of events like UK GovCamp throughout the year, for those of you who've been to that. And it's not just about data, digital and tech. And in fact, in all of the talks we've had so far, there's been a balance of innovation in that space, but with policy and other parts of government as well. And very importantly, for those of you in the room, there is also free pizza. Sorry that our budget doesn't quite extend to sending it to all of you watching us online. We're always looking for people to help out. So if you're interested in helping us organise, if you'd like to speak or if you'd like to sponsor, do get in touch with us. It's transformgovtalks@gmail.com. So how tonight is going to work, we've got two brilliant speakers for you this evening. We're going to give them about 25 minutes each, which will consist of them presenting for a bit, and then we'll be able to take questions. Now, when it comes to questions or discussion, you can ask a question if you're in the room by putting your hand up, if you're online by using the chat function on Google Meet, and if you're on either in the room or online, you can go to slido.com and use code 2060208 to submit a question. We'll finish at around 7, and for those of you in the room, or indeed for those of you watching us online who want to get into London very, very quickly, we will be heading to the Buckingham Arms afterwards as well. Our speakers tonight, first up, we're going to be hearing from Miriam Levin, who's from the think tank Demos. We'll be talking about Citizens' White Paper and lots of other sort of participatory policy-making work that Demos have been doing, so the what, why and how of involving the public in policy-making. And then after that, we'll be hearing from Sarah Crandall from the Government Digital Service. You might have been with us for our first event when we had Jenny Tennyson, who's on the advisory panel to the new digital centre work, and we had Andreas from i.ai, which is now part of the digital centre. So this has been a really important theme for us. We've recently had the blueprint for digital government published. So Sarah will be updating us on where all new GDS things have got to. A date for your diary. The next one of these will be on Wednesday, the 26th of March. We're moving to Wednesdays, the last Wednesday of the month from next month, where our first speaker will be Henry Midgley, who'll be talking about his new book about the National Audit Office and what that does for democracy and scrutiny. And TBC, which is not somebody really fashionable referring to themselves by lowercase initials. It is to be confirmed, but we will be looking for another speaker to fill that slot. So, that's enough from me. I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, and that's Miriam.
Yes, hello. So I'm Miriam Levin. I'm the Director of Participatory Programmes at a think tank called Demos. For those of you who haven't heard of us, we've been around for about 30 years. We're cross-party, so we're not aligned with any particular political view. We work with all parties, and that all-party-ness is something that we're thinking about quite hard at the moment, given the current political context. But we are indeed cross-party, non-partisan. And what I'm going to be talking about tonight is a publication that we wrote last year called the Citizens' White Paper, which essentially sets out how, why, and what citizens being involved in policy making actually means and why government should do it. So it was aimed squarely at national government to basically make the case for why you should engage citizens as you are developing your policy. All these big policy decisions that central government makes all the time. Where's the public in that? How can you involve the public more, and why should you do it? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that we undertook to kind of write the Citizens' White Paper, and just what I hope is kind of open up a bit of discussion about why it's important to involve the public and what that means for democracy today, for trust, for all the things that are feeling ever more pressing in this particular political moment. So what is participatory policymaking? When we talk about involving the public in policymaking, what on earth am I talking about? So essentially, we're talking about involving people. It's an approach that enables people who are going to be impacted by your policy. There's people who are doing policymaking every day, people who are going to actually be affected by that policy. It just means bring them into the conversation, talk to them, understand from them what is the problem you're actually trying to solve, like how to actually affect them on the ground, and what are their ideas and solutions for how you can tackle that problem. And it's about bringing people together collectively so you can talk to a really big range of people, a cross-section of people with a diverse set of views and opinions and experiences, and bring them together to work through what are the problems, what might some of the solutions be. Because what the kind of the essence of participatory policymaking is all about, it's about enabling the public to have a considered collective judgment on something. And as we'll come back to kind of as we move through this presentation, it's kind of very different from an evolution of sort of focus groups, social kind of social research sort of methodologies, which are about, let me just understand people's knee-jerk reaction as they walk into the room. Really important to know that stuff. But participation and participatory policymaking is going further than that, into really bringing people together so they can like talk together and change their minds and work out things together and reach an area of collective agreement about what you should do about the thing. So we often look at this spectrum of public participation, and my little thing at the bottom that says where this comes from, I managed to cut it off the slide, but it's from the International Association of Public Participation's Spectrum of Participation. Get the reference right. Basically, it's a spectrum of participation when you're talking about involving people. And it goes from informing and consulting to involving, collaborating, and empowering. And on that spectrum, all of those stages are really important. One is not better than the next one. They really depend on what you're trying to do and when you're trying to do it. But what we're talking about with participatory policymaking is involving and collaborating. It's that bit of the spectrum that we're really focused on. You still need to inform people about what you're doing. There's still sometimes you just need to be on broadcast. Sometimes it's just like, we're doing a thing, we're just going to tell you about it, we need you to know. That's completely fine and reasonable. Sometimes it's about consultation. It's just about, look, we've already made up kind of our minds on the thing we're going to do, how to feel about it. And I think we can all say we've been involved in some consultations which are inherently pointless and don't actually take very far, and often those are a bit of a waste of time, I find, but sometimes they can be a useful tool to use. But in scope, the thing we're really talking about is involving people, working with people directly, like impacted by the thing, really understand kind of public concerns and aspirations and build that into your thinking as you develop the policy, and going so far as to collaborate with the public, partner with them in terms of coming up with what some of the solutions might be. Now, the end of that spectrum is empowerment. And that's really interesting, because that basically goes, but it's not just about listening to what the public say and then using that to inform your decision making. It's actually about putting the power to make the decision in the public hands. And that has a place, and it's brilliant and important, but it's not what we're talking about when we're talking to national government, because we have a representative democracy and we have elected politicians for a reason, and ultimately we think actually the decision has to rest with them, but they can use all the evidence and the kind of the understanding that comes from involving the public to inform their decision making. So that's why we've got involving and collaborating as being the key elements of the work. But why do you do it? So actually, I'm really interested. How many people are civil servants in the room? Oh, at least half of you. Okay, so what? I suppose this is kind of a question for you particularly. It's like, well, why would you do it? Because involving the public, I'm talking about more work. It's like, and I've been a civil servant for about 5 years, until about 2020. So I know how hard it is. Like, your job's really hard, your workloads are huge, your ministers want the answer yesterday. And what we're talking about here is involving the public, like this other step, this other thing that you could be doing. So why should you do it? Well, to answer that, we wanted to look at, well, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Why would you involve the public? And as part of the Citizens' White Paper, we did a lot of research. We talked to about 17, I think it was, ministers, ex-ministers and shadow ministers, and current and former, but very senior civil servants, plus a workshop with sort of middle-ranking civil servants. We were talking about like what is the issues with policy making now? What are some of the challenges that you face as you're making policy? And this is basically what they told us. The main one being, when you're sitting in Whitehall in a department like Ministry of Justice or DCMS or MHCLG, you're really far removed from people. Actually, it's very hard to make that connection back to the people who are actually in the job centres trying to get a DP appointment. All of those issues, we face them as kind of members of society, but it's quite hard as a civil servant to kind of really understand what it looks like on the ground unless you actually just go out and talk to people. A lot of people told us about how policymakers feel very disempowered to try new things. There isn't really the incentive to try new things. It's very hard to put your head above the parapet and kind of put your neck on the line for something when actually there isn't much incentive to work in a different way, because actually often things just have to be done very, very quickly. People told us about how policy making is informed by the usual suspects. So I think civil servants generally are really good at talking to really good at knowing who their stakeholders are and who those third sector business partners might be that they can work with and talk to. And those stakeholders might have fantastic links to actual people. Often it gets stuck at that kind of stakeholder level. So you're not really talking to the people who are literally dealing with the stuff on the ground. And sometimes those usual suspects only represent a partial view. They're not giving you the full picture of what's actually happening. And we did the research before the last election. Political turbulence isn't conducive to long-term policy making. So you can all remember kind of a period over the last year, couple of years, where lots of changes in Prime Minister and ministerial teams. I'm not going to read those out because I don't want to kind of take up too much time, but I will share this presentation afterwards. But these are some of the quotes from kind of political advisors and senior civil servants about just how difficult it is kind of doing this job. I always think this one's really interesting. So this guy who we were interviewing was a Director General, and he felt like he didn't have his hand on the lever of power. It's like, wow, you're a Director General. If you don't have any power, if you don't feel like you can do anything differently, what chance does the rest of us have? We decided, having a conversation about this, it's like, well, who does have power? We said a Treasury. Treasury has all the power. So why do it? So we kind of understand what the problems are with the way policy making is done, but why should you take this extra step and talk to the public about kind of the issues that they're experiencing? So we kind of think about it in a few different ways, but it's about improving policy by real world proofing. So it's like, actually, before you put the policy out there, you're just going to have talked to the people who are either going to be on the front line enacting it, or the people who are going to be kind of benefiting from that piece of legislation or that policy, just to really understand what the real world effects might be if you put that into practice. Because it's better to know that up front than after you've spent the time and the money, the energy, really rolling it out to the public. It's like doing it beforehand, before it fails at first contact with reality, because you haven't involved people. It's also a way of working through really divisive or toxic issues. So a lot of, I'm sure we can name 15 hot button topics at the moment. Immigration is probably top of that list, which is so difficult, so toxic, so polarizing, and kind of hard to have a rational and kind of sensible debate about it. But you use some of the methods that I'll talk about in a bit, kind of to really bring people together, to have that respectful conversation, to have that kind of space and time and information and good facilitation to be able to work their way through the really, really difficult topics that are kind of rife across society at the moment. And sometimes those issues are so difficult and so political, going through a kind of a participatory way of involving people in policy making is a way to strip the politics out of it, or certainly strip the party politics out of it, because it's a way of enabling people to kind of step out of that world and just go, well, actually, what does it mean for me? What's it mean for society? What does it mean for the common good if we're looking at, say, immigration? And that kind of leads on to the next piece, which is about overcoming politically stuck problems. Like, some of these things are so difficult that they are thrown into the long grass. Like sorting out adult social care is probably a really good example for that. It's like, that's been basically broken for decades. It's been going wrong for a really long time. And it's always just like, it's in the too hard bucket. Actually, it's not like we don't need to sort out adult social care. So how can we find a way of having a conversation with the public that strips out some of the political kind of toxicity of that argument, to go, well, actually, what do people want? What do they need? And how are we going to pay for it? Just having the conversation that means you can find a way through that the public can get behind, because they've been part of the coming up with the solution. But building greater legitimacy for solutions. So if you've been part of coming up with the policy, it's like, well, you're going to get behind it, aren't you? Because you were part of that process. Avoiding the fiscal and trust costs of policy failure. We've all seen it. When the government tries to implement a thing, it fails, they have to U-turn, come back. That doesn't do very much for trust, and it costs quite a lot of money when they do that. So why don't we not do that, try and get it right first time by having tested it with people before you put it all out in the field. And the last one, actually, I think is the most important one, which is about building back trust in government. We have a massive crisis of trust at the moment. It is a massive problem. To me, it is the most existential question facing the country at the moment, the fact that people don't have trust in politicians, in politics, in political institutions. We did a survey as part of the Citizens' White Paper, and 76% of people don't believe that politicians make decisions in the best interest of the country. That's terrifying, because that's the basis of our democracy, and people aren't thinking it's working for them, because you know what? It's not really working for them. So how do we find a way of tackling that massive trust issue? Not by, you know, you can go down two routes here. You can go, well, democracy is not working, we'll have an autocrat, please. It's like I'd really rather we didn't go down that route. So the other option is, democracy is really not working for us. Okay, let's make it more participatory. Let's give people some agency and some scope to really be involved in this stuff, so that they can believe that actually government is listening, making decisions in their best interests with them, not to them, but with them, and help to build back some of that trust. Because I think, as what we're seeing in America, it's scary when you don't go down that route. So to me, that is probably the biggest reason for doing this. And Sir Keir Starmer also talked a lot about this. So the Prime Minister, this was at the state opening of Parliament, and there is a recognition, I think, from the current government that it really is, it's a massive problem that we need to get on top of. We can think about how well that's going at the moment. Like, how do we do it? I'm just kind of aware of time, so I might rattle through this a little bit faster. There are different ways of involving citizens in policy making. I'm not going to talk through all of these. If you want to read more about them and when you might use them, it is all in the Citizens' White Paper. We've kind of mapped out kind of what the methods might be. But a lot of people have heard of citizens' assemblies. Who has heard of citizens' assemblies? Excellent. It's a way of bringing people together who are a randomly selected but representative cross-section of the public to take on a really difficult, knotty, toxic issue and work it through in a really respectful, well-facilitated environment to come up with recommendations that could be of use to the commissioning body, whether that's government or local government or whoever. And there are different kind of scales of that. So, you know, you can do it with less people and less time if you're having a citizens' jury. You can run a series of deliberative workshops, which are kind of slightly less structured in terms of the pure citizen assembly way, but it's just a way of doing it into a budget and to a timescale that works a bit better for the very tight budgets and very tight timescales that you often have when you're doing policy making in government. There's co-design that brings people together who's not just members of the public, but bringing together experts and frontline staff and all the different actors in a particular system, including members of the public, to come up with solutions that work across the system. I've lost both my microphones. That was my microphone. Thank you. Yeah, bringing people together to kind of come up with answers that work across whole systems, and community conversations, which are a more informal way of understanding kind of where the public are at on a particular issue. And you might think about those different tools in terms of what question are you trying to ask, what kind of scale of budget and time do you have, and how many people do you like, what scale of people do you want to try and reach through this process. There's a few examples. Most people have heard of the first one, the Irish Citizens' Assembly on Abortion. And I really, while we use it a lot as an example of a citizens' assembly, I still think it's one of the most powerful, because I think if you can take an issue like abortion in a Catholic country like Ireland, where there was no chance that the government was going to be brave enough to change the rules on abortion, if you can actually have a really deep and respectful conversation about it to the point where a very, very wide cross-section of the public go, actually, yeah, we're fine with this. Yes, actually, we will be brave and we will say that abortion should be legal in all cases. If you can do that on abortion in Ireland, you can basically take any difficult, divisive, polarizing topic and work it through. And they did in Ireland. After 6 months of deliberation, the Citizens' Assembly came to the conclusion that abortion should be legalised. Government held a referendum, and then they changed the law. Well, the referendum agreed with the Citizen Assembly, and they changed the law. The other one I talk about here is a set of deliberative workshops on inheritance tax. So we ran that at Demos. We ran six workshops with 24 people on inheritance tax. Who knows about inheritance tax in detail? Yeah, most people don't. Most people kind of know, yeah, you pay that when you die. It's really, really complicated. And through 6 workshops, we took people through a deep enough understanding of what inheritance tax is that they could work through some very, very difficult and complicated questions about reform to come up with a reform package that they could, it was their reform package. We had all sorts of different kind of ways of reforming it, that they selected of kind of different elements to put together a package that actually, yeah, would have increased the tax take by £2 billion. And the public actually said really clearly, leave farms alone. It's like, we did tell you that, the government. Anyway, they didn't do that, and there was a big backlash. Not that it's what they're doing is wrong, but just that actually, if you talk to the public, they feel really strongly about farmlands and about food production, unsurprisingly. And then the last one is about co-design on social care staffing. So for that project, we brought together people who draw on care, frontline workers, directors of adult social care, social workers, care providers, to really look at how do we increase the number of frontline staff. And by coming together all those different bits of the system, they work through a whole series of different reforms and policy changes that could actually make a difference, that would work for all the different parts of the system. And that's the strength of the co-design process. Very quickly, I'm going to just talk about where we got to in the Citizens' White Paper. So we set out in the Citizens' White Paper what participatory policymaking is, why you should do it. And then the how was aimed very squarely at government to go, actually, if you really want to rebuild trust, if you want to do better policy making, if you want to empower citizens, kind of this is how you could do it. And we had we had 9 actions, but they basically fitted into 2 buckets. One of them were flagship public-facing actions that really send that signal out to the public, like, we're going to do things differently. We are going to build a different relationship between citizen and state. So kind of set pieces. And then the other actions were really internal civil servant facing, just going, actually, how do you make this part of everyday policy making? This is what teams do all day, every day, thinking about policy. How do you build in those different ways of working kind of into the everyday so it becomes business as usual? And here are our 9 recommendations. Some of them we said, sort of, do it immediately. It's like, right, yeah, quite done, all of those, yeah. Year 2 were kind of short-term actions, and year 3 plus kind of longer-term actions. But it was really about, like, this is step-by-step journey. It's like, if you do this, we really think this is going to make a difference. So I'm going to talk through them relatively quickly. First one is about missions. It's like, actually, the missions are really exciting. This is about cross-government working. This is about taking challenges on in a totally different way, really like thinking about cross-government, thinking about different partners that you bring in the public. The public are a really critical aspect here. Like, can we have citizens panels that kind of sit alongside those mission boards? That is that kind of public watching eye on what those decisions are that the mission boards are making to really help think through. It's like, well, what actually are people's priorities on this stuff? How do you make a very, very large mission like safer streets really concrete and meaningful for people? And what changes can you make? How do you bring people into that? The second action was really about what we heard from civil servants was that this stuff, yeah, we kind of get it. I think it's a good idea. People said, yeah, all right, we kind of be up for this. Don't really know how to do it. And it's really time-consuming and difficult. How do we actually find the people who we are supposed to engage if you're saying that we should engage people in our policy making? So that this number 2 was kind of an answer to that question, which was like, create a cross-government standing citizens pool that you could draw people off. So like some thousands of people, 2,500 people, we said, randomly selected but representative of a wider population, that teams could draw off people to, in a small section, small way, say have 25 people that represent the demography of the country, to have those conversations. But if what you want to do is reach a diverse section of the community. And then it's about building capacity within the civil service. So creating a hub, a central hub of expertise, because we know the expertise exists. That policy lab, you've got policy labs that sit in different departments like DFE or Home Office. The expertise is there and it's brilliant and it exists. How can we like kind of grow and strengthen and nurture that so that the skills and the capacity can then spread out and diffuse across the whole civil service? Because we know a lot of it exists. It's just about how do you make sure that people can like tap into that and feel confident enough to be able to do this work themselves. Well, the PM didn't do number 4. That was a shame. I thought that would be good. Like that kind of big flagship thing to hold citizens' assemblies on the really, really, really hot button issues of the day. Something like on assisted dying. Like that feels like that could have been a fantastic opportunity. It's like politicians are debating this. There is no 3-line whip. It's a free vote. To involve the public in that, to really take the pulse of the public when they've got time to really kind of bring their considered collective judgment to the issue. That's a really brilliant moment to have done that. But nevertheless, there are plenty of other kind of opportunities to do that kind of coming down the line. There's levers to encourage participatory policy making. Like, is there something like the impact quality assessment that you have to do before you put in a submission on a policy? Could there be a requirement to actually think about who have you actually spoken to in the public? How have you engaged the public in this? And if you haven't involved the public, do tell us why not. Like, explain why not, because it won't be appropriate in every context. Kind of how do you build that culture of participation, both from like, here's the thing you have to do, but also having departmental champions who can talk about this stuff, who can make it part of business as usual. And then thinking about Parliament and Parliament's roles and the involvement of citizens in scrutiny and kind of post-legislative scrutiny particularly, and select committee inquiries. It's like, where's the public voice in some of these committee processes, which are about really understanding where legislation, when it's being implemented, how does it landed? Has it had the effects that it was intended to? Which is actually number 8, citizen involvement in post-leg scrutiny. Just then the last one is around independent oversight, set standards and scrutinise processes. So this is more of a long-term thing, but actually, if we really want the government to do this well and be trusted, and this is like a really critical point, it's like we want these processes to be trusted by people, that they are really being listened to, they are really being heard, they are really part of this process, and they have some agency. Might need some standards just to make sure that it is actually being done really well, so not just paying lip service to doing the sort of consultations that we see often happening, which aren't actually really good engagement. That's a much longer term idea, but there does feel the need to kind of get these processes right to make sure that people can trust them. And that's it. I shall pause there. So just to conclude, what we were trying to do here is really set out the case for why you should involve citizens and public, involve the public in policy making at a national level. Why is this stuff important? What exactly is this thing that we're talking about, and how could you do it? And we hope kind of through that work that we have kind of taken the government, kind of moved on the journey, moved on the conversation a bit more. And there's a bit of a postscript. See, we published this in July last year, just after the election. And it does feel like things are moving and changing. It feels like it's been slow, but a wave is building, which is really exciting. So we have more and more people, we're hearing from more and more departments that either come to talk to us or kind of other people in the democracy sector. So how do we do this? So what does this look like, and how could this work in our policy area? And it does feel like there is a bit of a sea change in terms of kind of policy teams thinking about how they could involve different members of the public in the work that they do, which I have to say, given where I was and I left 5 years ago, is a completely different world. And it is very exciting. Thank you.
Miriam, thank you very much. We are going to squeeze in a few quick questions. I'm going to go online for the first one, actually. Some people using Slido. The code is 2060208 if you want to come in on slido.com. And this is a question I think is often asked about sort of citizen participation, which is, how do you ensure you actually reach a diverse group of people and not just people who have time, for example, well-meaning middle-class people?
And we love well-meaning middle-class people, and they have plenty to say. And it's great that they're involved, but they are not representative of the whole country. Of course they're not. We're not. I'm not. So with something like in fact, all the deliberative processes, the idea is that you get a random but representative group kind of in the room. So if you do a kind of gold standard method of sortition, essentially if you're like recruiting to a citizen assembly, you send out 20 to 30,000 letters to random addresses on the post office database, the biggest database that kind of exists in the country, to households across the country from all different areas and all different levels on the indices of multiple deprivation. So say 20 to 30,000 people get this letter going, do you want to be involved in citizen assembly, and explain what it is. Several hundred people then respond to that. Most people go, I don't know what this is, and throw it away. But enough people, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people go, yeah, all right then, and they register with their demographic details. And then from that process, those people who've registered, say 100 people who represent the demography of the country are then pulled off those people that signed up to go, to map in a group of 100 people the widest demography of the country in terms of age, gender, ethnicity, geography, political view, whatever you have national data on, you can record in the room. So it is the absolute critical point is that you have a proper spread who represents the country. Otherwise, it's just the people who usually take part.
Brilliant, thank you. I will take a question in the room. Have we got any in the Google chat as well? I'll come to you for one in a second. I'll take one question in the room if someone wants to put their hand up. First one I saw was this. Do you tell us who you are, where you're from? Remember, we are on the record, and do keep it short so we can squeeze one from online.
Thanks. I'm Jeff from the Ministry of Justice. What struck me when you went through the list of all the ways we could engage with people is that we have thousands of civil servants already working in government who are really experienced with researching with the public and designing with the public, but almost all of them are working in digital teams on digital services. Is there an opportunity to capitalize more on bringing those people? They're already here. They're just not being used in these other parts of their own departments. How can we bring those people directly into this work better?
It's so funny. We were having this conversation like just before. It's just like, tech people do this. You already do user-centered design. Of course you do. It's the way you will build any app or any program. You already think about the users in a way that policymakers traditionally don't. You know, that kind of just that. Of course, that's the way you do it. It's not part of the everyday policymaker mentality. So in terms of like, how do we bring in that expertise and users? Oh my God, yes. How do we do this? So I wonder if, so there's something called the Participatory Methods Forum, which is a cross-government network of civil servants who are trying to both raise awareness about and build capacity on and talk about and raise up the profile of doing participatory work. I wonder if there's some kind of bringing together of those two worlds to make sure that all that experience that you hold in the digital and tech sector is absolutely core to the way policymaking is done, because yeah, why wouldn't you? Amazing.
And a nice easy one from the Google chat to finish, which is consultation participation necessarily slows down delivery, but wouldn't people trust politics more if they can see politicians actually delivering? Can we really take the politics out of politics and find consensus solutions? Sometimes politicians need to take decisions for the greater good.
Yes. So that politicians do have to take decisions for the greater good. But what is magnificent about the public when they're given time and space to deliberate on stuff is so do they. They get to the point where everybody comes into the room with their own baggage, and their own stuff, and their own political views, or views like created by their parenting or their neighbours. We all have it. We all have our own stuff, right? But you bring people together for a decent amount of time to really work through that and to listen to each other in a way that we just don't, because we're all in our echo chambers most of the time. People get beyond their own personal and get to the common good. So people do that. And I think they do it better than sometimes. I think people are really good. We've seen it over and over and over again. All the deliberative processes I've ever been involved in. The people think beyond themselves to the common good. And that can help inform politicians to make the decisions, which will be really hard for some people, because certain decisions, of course, are going to have bigger impacts than on some people than others. And it's about what can the public get behind and how they're going to get behind it by being part of the process to come up with the idea.
Brilliant. Well, Miriam, thank you very much indeed. And we will share those slides afterwards, and do read the Citizens White Paper. It's a really great piece of work and very practical as well. We'll share a link to that. So I'm now going to invite to the stage our second speaker. So we've talked a bit about sort of policy and participation and digital. We're now very much into the digital bit. So Sarah, over to you.
Oh, thank you. How is that? Is that okay? Okay. There we go. So hi, my name is Sarah Crandall. And my slides will appear. Yeah, there we go. So I'm joining you from the Government Digital Service as engagement lead. Before I get started, how many people here are familiar with Government Digital Service? Oh, this is going to be easy. Okay. If you're joining online, I'm just assuming you raised your hand as well. Tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are, what we do, and especially about how you can get involved with our work and I think that this will tie in very closely with some opportunities for greater citizen inclusion in some of our pieces. But just want to head off with GDS has a big remit for changing how government does digital, and it's focused on improving its impact, principally on citizens, but also our key senior, civil servant stakeholders, and partners in private sector folk as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the context for the change, and then take you through an introduction to kind of who we are, what we're doing, or what we have done, and what we're also planning on doing, and additionally a little bit of a promo and a call to action at the end, which is, I've been reliably informed, the best way to end a presentation. So I'm going to be describing the ambition as comprehensive and compelling change. So I'm hoping that that gets you interested as well, Miriam, following your piece. Here we go. So on the 22nd of January, the Secretary of State, Peter Kyle, publicly launched the new government digital service. It's a big comprehensive change, and we committed to delivering a bunch of new digital products. You can see one right here. And then reinforcing government commitment to kind of proactively meeting users where they are. And I think that really ties in nicely. I made sure to kind of copy Miriam's citizen involvement line so that I could tie in nicely with hers. And then we've also published the State of Digital Government report, as well as a blueprint for modern digital government. So setting out the context for change, or the case for change, followed very closely with how we're going to do it. And then, of course, the changed scope and plan and ambitions for the renewed digital center, which we have, not surprisingly, called Government Digital Service. Move into that pace. So a little bit of background on these two pieces of work if you're not familiar, and you've also just had better things to do. Let's be frank, they're kind of big, bulky pieces of work. The State of Digital Government Review was a very comprehensive review done by private sector partners, people from government digital services, digital partners from across government, private sector partners and delivery suppliers. It was a really comprehensive piece of work that we dug into the state of digital government and how it's working and where our challenges and our issues are. And what we came up with was some really big headline figures. So one is that there's 45 billion per year of savings and productivity that we're losing out on by just not taking advantage of key digital tooling and efficiencies. So that's a big number, and it's a really great opportunity for us to take advantage of. Other headlining acts are that in the list of government major projects and portfolios, the majority of tech programs, so 60%, are classified as red, which is very low expectation of it to successfully deliver. Only 9% are classed as green, so that we are reasonably expected to deliver that major government technical program. 50% of digital and data recruitment programs have failed. So we are not getting the talent in that we want to. In 2019, the failure rate was only 22% of those recruitment programs. And additionally, high-performing private sector organizations usually achieve a ratio of about 4 technical or digital-shaped people to 1 non-digital person. In the government, that's a 2-to-1 ratio. So we've got a lot more, or kind of a dearth of digital and technical talent complementing what we're doing in a kind of policy or support-shaped place. Moving on to the blueprint, which is kind of what we're going to do about all these problems that we've identified. It's setting out how we're going to see the current state of play. It's our vision for what the future might look like, and it's a plan for reaching it. It's a really long-term plan. It's multi-year, and this is the start for it. Okay, so one of the things is I wanted to address some things about what's different this time. We've got a lot of digital transformation under our belt. Some of it successful, some of it not. Frank, a bunch of it not. But additionally, I wanted to kind of address some of the proactive pieces that we're doing to commit to the change working this time. One is that there's huge recognition across public sector that the digitization is the key to unlocking getting public services working for people. So that's shared across the board. Everybody agrees that you get digital working, you get the services working, you reach the people where they are and give them what they need. There's also a clear and shared vision, and that's backed by senior ministerial commitment from a variety of different places. There's a bunch of acronyms. I'm not going to read them out right now, but just to say we've got Treasury, Cabinet Office, Department for Science, Innovation, and Tech, all these big kind of influential folk, and especially, as you say, Treasury has the power, they're on board, right? And they're supportive of the digital transformation work that we're committed to. It's a strengthened digital center of government, and that's the government digital service that I'm going to talk about tonight. So committing to creating a joined up group of digital experts to be critical partners to people who are doing digital across government, but also policy folk as well. And if we can get and help policy people to do a little bit more user-centered stuff, that is one of our key principles and kind of practical commitments is user-centered design, and that underpins the government digital service ethos. And then also a commitment to fixing the systemic blockers that have caused a lot of issues for, just reaching the citizens where they are, but also helping civil servants do their jobs effectively. One of the big pieces that I'm personally looking forward to is funding reform and funding digital services for whole life, rather than just build it and throw it over the edge to a BAU team who might be capable of maintaining it. Yeah, that made me happy, and I'm going to talk about that with you later. So yeah, just to be reflective of what is happening behind the scenes, is that the government digital service is being composed of constituent parts that are being brought together. So we've got the government digital service, which you all raised your hand and you're familiar with. Their headline acts are like gov.uk, One Login, gov.uk Pay, which I had to bring up because I thought Rich was coming today, but he backed out. But Rich, I know you're online, and I mentioned it. Then we've got the Central Digital and Data Office, where I sat, that oversees things like performance and assurance, the service standard, the service assessments, but also like the capability framework and the DDAP framework, and the government digital and data function across government. We've got the geospatial, formerly the Geospatial Commission, and some exceptional pieces of work that they're doing, especially about kind of like geographic data, and the National Underground Asset Register. Super cool. And then we've got also pieces of the Responsible Technology Adoption Unit are coming over to Government Digital Service. And then we also have the Incubator for AI for Government. They're going to be an autonomous piece inside Government Digital Service. So they're keeping their branding. But they've got some amazing pieces. And so they're responsible for introducing, basically looking at problems that are cross-government problems and seeing where AI can be applicable to solving them. So they've got a suite of tools, which are public, and you can go ahead and have a peek at them. There's some really cool pieces. If you've ever seen the term Humphrey in the news lately, it's referring to these tools that they've developed, and they're really fun to play with. This is really, I think, the big pitch, which is to say, why should you care, right? And a big piece of that is the commitment to transparency. So, a big piece of that, greater clarity on what the center does, and who to go for what. That's a big piece of how we're going to make sure that we are a critical partner to government and to stakeholders and everybody else. We're also going to elevate the digital and data profession, so it's seen as a decision maker and a driver of public service reform. So again, if that's an opportunity to potentially help and support a more citizen-centric decision making and inclusive thing, I'm all for it. I'm available. You can come and talk to me later. There's also the confidence to work in the open, so being really open about the challenges that government is facing. But additionally, second point, highlighting this, the big wins. So people across government are working incredibly tirelessly to solve problems at a local level because they know their users and they know their constraints and their context, and they're finding amazing opportunities to be innovative and really solution oriented. And then nobody sees it because it was done in some kind of job center in Norwich, right? We'd like to be able to be a place to highlight those wins and to really kind of signal boost that message about what good digital delivery looks like and how we're serving the citizens and the users. I also want to highlight that we want to be an easier way to join up work across organizations. So yeah, we're talking about how to share data across different government departments, but additionally it's about organizational sharing of data and organizational collaboration to solve common problems. And that's a big piece of the unblocking, is if you can look at the really big picture and solve big problems together, you have more likely to succeed. It's kind of like the IKEA effect you mentioned, but if you're involved in the solution to a problem, you remain committed to it. So it works for civil servants too. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna cover that next, but I'm gonna just reiterate something that people have been concerned about. So I'm gonna just say, Government Digital Services remains committed to the existing services and products that we provide, also our policies and our governance models, our support for people. If you have an MOU with Government Digital Service, we will still be honoring it. So that's not changing. I have cherry picked this from a list because these are my favorites. This is not a comprehensive list in any way. And when I circulate these slides, you can use the links to all of the other rest of the bits. I'm not going to read them out right now. But if you have interest in any specific thing, ask me a question afterward. Hopefully I'll be able to give you some headlining pieces of additional products and services that are from our BAU catalog, if you will. So I wanted to just be very, very clear that that remains on the table, and those things are not, they are changing. We're trying to do iteration and improvement on them, but they remain. So that's just a critical one. And this is what I want to just promote now, is some of the new pieces of work that are coming out and making sure that we're highlighting those and that we're kind of owning those as commitments on behalf of the Government Digital Service. So you'll see more of these in detail with dedicated comms and upcoming events, which I'll highlight at the end, and I hope you all come. And that you have any questions about any here, we're really keen to follow up with you on that. So just talking you through some of the products that you've seen at the public launch. So really cool, shiny new things like the app and the wallet and the chat, which are really fun. And if you get a chance, like playing around with like the chat prototype and stuff, if you get like one of those kind of, would you like to participate in some of our early testing in UR or user research site? I'm not supposed to use acronyms this much. Incredibly fun to play with, just really fun. And that's the Humphrey suite that we mentioned that had been developed in-house. You can already like go to the I.AI website, and if you want to use my slides that are being circulated later, it'll have a link directly to the suite of tools. You can go and have fun. The Minute app is incredibly useful. And additionally, I want to just really highlight the work of our folk at Geospatial. The National Underground Asset Register is incredibly cool and nerdy. So if you want to have a niche opportunity, get in there and play with it. It's really cool. And then additionally, I want to take a point, and especially with Nick Smith in the room, to point out our recommitment to the communities of practice that was built into some of our pieces. And just to kind of reiterate, that was a piece of Government Digital Service previous commitments, and we're reviving it and bringing it back and looking at it in a different and kind of joined up way, so that it's not a GDS owned space, but it's rather representative of the whole of the communities of the practice. Brilliant. And this is my kind of end pitch. So hopefully I've not bored you all and you're still with me here. So getting involved. So as engagement lead, I'm really here to establish relationships, get you interested and involved in what we're doing. I'm really hoping that there are opportunities from individual pieces of work that we're doing. So the National Data Library Discovery that's coming up. I had to mention that because it's been in the news lately. But like, if you want to know more about that, there are opportunities to be talking about those in these kind of forums. But additionally, if you don't have a specific piece of work you'd like to know more about, there are just general engagement opportunities through these various pieces that we're organizing or part of. So like Innovate 2025, we're having a lot of our senior leadership and expertise in that space, even though we don't organize it. And lots of us will be attending as well. So if you just want to network, there'll be a lot of really excited people hopped up on free coffee from Government Digital Services there. Service, singular. I keep saying services. I'm sorry. Sorry, Nick. Yeah, additionally, getting involved, we have a Government Digital and Data Bulletin on behalf of the function that we are incredibly proactive with, and we've got a wonderful community of digital and data actors across government service, and that includes people outside of central government. So how are we expanding into the health and to the local government spaces, police, digital, like we're, you know, prison reform, it's fun, good fun. But there's this expansion of our collaboration space. So being a critical partner to the variety of people that want to do digital well and are already doing digital well. And how do we signal boost the good work that they're already doing? How do we support them proactively with guardrails or guidance or tooling that will enable them to continue doing that good work? Or how do we just get out of your way? And how do we make sure that you are able to do the incredible good digital work that you're already doing in Emoji, for example? Love what you're doing. And then how do we make sure that like there are opportunities for collaboration, and how do we proactively seek those out and take advantage of them when we're identifying them? So these are different ways to get in touch. And I'd really like to definitely hear from anybody's kind of concern. I did make this shorter because I thought I was going to have to build the Q&A into the time that I was allotted. But yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming for the free pizza and then listening to me while you ate it. But if you have any other questions, please do ask, and especially online in Slido. And if you have anything further that we haven't done, please take advantage of this wonderful new email address that we've worked very hard to get set up in time for this. So please do, yeah, take advantage for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sarah. We do have time for questions. I might come to the room first this time. Who'd like to ask Sarah a question about the many, many, many things that you could do?
Stage, please ask a question. No problem.
Let me.
Oh,
Do you
sure,
want to?
He's asking a question.
Oh, you want to?
Sorry, he volunteered, so I figured I'd give you some space. Sorry.
Do you tell us who you are, where you're from, if you can? We're on the record. Wait for the mic.
Thank you. I'm David Durant. I'm one of the organisers this evening. Hello, everybody. All the things you put up at the end, fantastic. Slack, events, brilliant. Love it. All of those seem to be for civil servants. If you're outside of the civil service, you can sign up for the bulletin, so you get information from GDS, and you can send information to this shiny new email address, so you can send things to GDS.
It's open to anyone.
But if you want to participate laterally with other people that might be interested, there isn't really a forum for that yet. Has there been any thoughts? There's lots of really interesting things out there, like Discourse or Polis or, you know, a public Slack or something. Some way that people who aren't within government can communicate would be awesome.
I would just because I would be remiss if I didn't mention it, because he does an amazing set of work. The LinkedIn Engagement Forum, which is open to anybody to engage with. We've got GDS LinkedIn space, but also the government digital and data, function LinkedIn space. And the person on the comms team who runs that space is incredible. Like, does amazing work. Hi, Sam. But I just want to kind of point that out as a really public forum that is being currently utilized by a lot of people that's not civil servant particularly shaped. But yeah, one is to listen to more people about where are you and how do we engage with you in a more proactive way that's meaningful for the members of the public, and that's an incredibly diverse space. So we're going where the people are, which is mostly LinkedIn. But if there are numbers of people in spaces that are meaningfully that we need to engage with, that's a place to consider and how we can do it. We want to make sure that it's more of an engagement space rather than the bulletin, which is a bit more of a, here's a bunch of information. And we're making sure that that is kind of increasingly reflective of the people that we work with rather than just the government digital service, information space.
Brilliant, thanks. Any more questions in the room? Got one at the back from a previous TransformGov presenter.
Yeah, I'm Simon at MOJ. It's really encouraging to see service assessments are still on there.
Yes.
They've died a death at the moment, and they're not really fit for purpose, and they're a bit of a box ticking exercise, and there hasn't really been any investment in that in the same way as actually community practice for a long time, particularly since the split of CDDO and GDS. Can you talk a little bit more about how the centre of government is actually going to re-infuse and reinvigorate that, not only for digital, but hopefully for any service that, because it's never really broken outside of the digital bubble, and really everybody should be
something on the first part. That second part's probably way outside my remit. Okay. But yes, so my day job is a senior digital and data advisor with the performance and assurance team. So I overlook spend controls, and I sit in the same team with all the service assessment team. So I'm deeply invested in the functionality and the purpose and kind of the contribution and impact of service assessments. And I say that because they're watching. But a big piece of that is just the commitment to the service assessments to move it in from a tick box marking exercise and an end of life, you've finished your alpha, and alpha being the experimental stage, just in case somebody else is joining that doesn't know that. The experimental stage where you've thrown up a prototype and you're testing it out. So you finish your prototype, you've reached your end of your alpha stage, we're going to show up and just make you do a day-long interrogation about the experience you've had at your alpha. It's really not proactively useful because it's a test at the end, right? Where we're trying to move that is what we call moving the conversation to the left in the performance and assurance space, which is how do we proactively enable you to look at the service standard at an early stage and say, congratulations, you're building a service. You've got the go ahead at the front door. I didn't do that, did I?
No. You carry on. I'll work that out.
Sorry. It is time for the pump. And somebody said, time to go. But anyway, no. service assessments are being innovated in incredible ways in other spaces. MOJ has an amazing methodology for proactively looking at their service assessments in a different way by doing recordings. So you can do a recording of the demonstration of the service you've created. You can submit that to the service assessors, and then you can do a follow-up conversation so that you don't have to eat up your time with the service assessors, wasting it doing another demo. They've already seen it. They've already seen the back end. They've already done like a review of your user research so that you can spend all that time talking about it in the MOJ service assessments. I love talking about like how you've innovated that space. There's a lot of work behind the scenes in the performance and assurance team and in the strategy team to see what the needs are out there to how we can improve service assessments. Like the service assessor community, we're trying to build that up more meaningfully, but also enabling people who are in that community to inform how they're experiencing like running these assessments. It's a lot of time and commitment. So I'm a service assessor, like I'm an assessor, and you know, I've got a lot of colleagues in government digital service who are volunteer assessors. It sucks a lot of time out of your day to be able to do that effectively. Wouldn't that be nicer if we had those conversations in that time dedicated to people at the beginning of their journey, where they're looking at just passing the service assessment and you're preparing them and tutoring them, kind of like, instead of just spending all your time in an exam at the end. Like, couldn't we have a better, more meaningful impact to prep you for what the services standards are and how to, you know, meet them, rather than like, you didn't do it and no one helped you to do it, so we're going to punitively look at you for not having done it. And so like a big piece of our relationship reset with government is how do we proactively partner with people, especially service delivery teams, who are going to be coming through to service assessments and make that more meaningful to them so that they can build better services from the get-go rather than kind of be assessed and have to go back and try again. It's not like a done deal, but it is work that is going on. And if you want to know more, like get on the Slack channel, the Service Assessment CrossGov Slack channel, and make your opinions known. You will find a lot of people with thumbs up emojis underneath you. That was a long answer.
No, it was a good one. Now, clearly the tech gods want us to go to the pub and eat pizza, but I am going to squeeze in an online question, which is, what advice would you give to help organizations to better align agile methodology with traditional project management, often waterfall?
That is a deeply philosophical question. Like that is like we can that I could be here for quite a long time talking about the nuances of both those different mindsets, the philosophies, the ways of working, the cultural change that's necessary for all of that stuff, plus the empowerment methodologies, the organizational designs that enable agile delivery versus, you know, a waterfall system. Like that is an incredibly complicated question. Who asked that?
Lisa McDowell.
Okay, so Lisa, we will like join up in a pub at some point and talk about that, like in a more meaningful way. I cannot address that today. I would say that like we're joined by colleagues who dealt with that challenge on a variety of different fronts. So I used to work on digital transformation and agile conversations for GDS International back in the day. So we'd be going out to other countries who were looking at digital transformation. We'd be talking about how to introduce agile in a context where they've either never considered it, or they're like, it belongs in software and nowhere else. Or like other places where they've gone, it's very nice, we sent some people on a Scrum Master certification course, and then we plunked them right back into the waterfall space, and we're like, well, that was a waste of money, wasn't it? Like, it's very demoralizing when people don't understand the nuances of agile and like what it can bring to an organization, and like also what is necessary to do the hard work up front to make it work. So I would say that yes, like there's some meaningful conversations about how it can work, like how you can bring it into spaces and how you can sort of like guerrilla agile, like, and find new and useful opportunities to like promote it. And I think one of the pieces that like agile brings is like the center of the user, or kind of like the inclusion of users into like meeting their needs very quickly and like effectively. And so there's kind of conversations where we can kind of bring in user-centered design as a concept to sell agile as a way of meeting those kind of user needs. And if we can increase the kind of commitments to citizen engagement, then like if you do that work, then I can just bring an agile behind you and be like, and here's how to do it in the digital space, and that would be fun. So like there are things, but that's a huge question. I'm really sorry I can't give like a pithy answer. I should have just said yes. Like
Lisa said she's down for the pub to chat about it more. Maybe that's nice.
Okay, can I just ask Lisa not to email gds@dsit.gov.uk with an invitation to the pub, but like follow up with me on Slack or something? That'd be better. Okay.
Yeah, an invitation to come to the whole of GDS would become an unconference very quickly, I think, wouldn't it?
We would pretty much self-organize, though, very effectively at the beginning, and then it would disseminate in a manner by around the 5th or 6th drink.
Would be fun.
Yeah.
Sarah, thank you very much indeed. Now I'm going to do some final quick parish notices, which are going to be very entertaining for those of you in the room, because you can't see the slide, but people online can. So we actually have some parish notices, which are other events that you might be interested in that are coming up. On the 5th of March, I'm hosting Data Bites with Public Digital just down the road at Broadway House. That's a platform for people doing interesting things with data in government. So do look for Public Digital Data Bites. On the 20th of March, something which connects both of our speakers tonight, actually the topics that they've been talking about, connected by data, someone else I work with, we're holding an unconference on how the public sector should involve the public on data and AI specifically. As we've still got some spaces, do come along, that'd be great fun. Camp Digital is coming up on the 3rd of July, and that's www.nexa, as in NEXER digital.com/campdigital/2025. Do check that out. We've also got something to share from Rachel Caldicott, which is a union for technologists. The idea that maybe we might all want to start talking about what we do. Those of us who perhaps don't have certain political views that we might be seeing in the United States at the moment, we've got a link to that which we'll be able to share as well. And again, do let us know about any other things you'd like us to advertise at the end of our next event, which will be on Wednesday, the 26th of March, 2025 at 6 p.m. here. Again, we are still looking for one speaker for that. So if you know anyone, do let us know. There's now a brilliant slide, which is the Lord Kitchener pointing at you again, saying organizer, speaker, sponsor. Do drop us a line on transformgovtalks@gmail.com or go to transformgov.org.uk if you'd like to help us out with anything. We're always looking for support. And if there's one thing that you do based on tonight, tell someone else how much you enjoyed it, because I certainly did. We've got two brilliant speakers and lots of great questions as well. Tell someone how much you enjoyed tonight. Tell them to sign up and tell them to tell their friends and come along to the next one. This is only our 3rd event. We're looking to build this community, talk about public sector reform, digital policy, participation, lots of other topics as well. And that takes me to the final slide. So we will be heading to the Buckingham Arms shortly. There is still some pizza left at the back. But before we do that, please join me in a final round of applause for our brilliant speakers tonight, Miriam and Sarah. Thank you so much.